Okay, same rules as last time. We are going to do 2-minute builds, no more time than 2 minutes. All of them get exactly 2 minutes, no more, no less. And then we move on. Ready, set, go. All right, so this is ward Dante. We have elemental ward over our 1 here, and we're using cold ward specifically. And then for final verse, we're going to be focusing on ward warden here. If you've never used Dante before, the basic idea here is that if you shoot at an enemy, ward warden is going to also shoot at them. And one interesting thing that you might have noticed here, especially if you're familiar with Dante, is that we're getting these blast procs, and then ward warden is actually firing again. So if you have blast on the book, anytime blast proc happens, your little companion guy here considers it you damaging them. So it can basically continuously fire. And so we have kind of an auto turret just from this alone, right? One other interesting thing that you can do to make the book auto fire is actually cold ward. So we're going to be using cold ward influence, which if you don't know is one of the jankiest things in the entire game at the moment. And the basic idea is that cold ward will spread as long as you have melee influence active, and then you can use Doriga to activate influence because of reasons. So we're going to wait for our Doriga to actually start proccing melee influence for us. And then what you'll see is that cold procs will instantly spread to everybody around us. All right, so you see that? This is with influence active. And you can see that my book has actually just started firing at them as soon as melee influence activated also. So this is actually doing a pretty good amount of damage, all things considered. For the actual builds, most important thing here is that both fire rate and multi-shot don't work on the ward warden version of this. So we are running Acuity here. That's why you saw like a 1.6 million damage headshot is because Acuity can actually work here. And then we have secondary shiver on here because while Noctua is additive CO, it's actually 160% additive specifically on ward warden. So it's 80% on the normal, but 160 on this version. And so because of that, secondary shiver in combination with cold ward and everything it actually ends up being pretty appreciably strong. This build is pretty unoptimized, so you can use it if you want to, but super unnecessary. Like just use it if you feel like it. Okay, so this next one's going to be kind of an introduction to one of the weirder parts of Codopathicist. This is just a good glaive in general. This weapon's pretty decent, but it does do this other thing where it spawns maggots like when you throw it. It also spawns them like when you just hit people with it, but we're going to be focusing just on the maggots in general. Interesting thing about the maggots, they only scale with melee damage and like a handful of other multipliers. One of those multipliers is actually Eclipse, so Mirage is 3 here. And then another thing that you can actually do is you can actually multiply them with just having more clones, because each of the clones glaives will also spawn maggots. So you can see that we've actually we've basically multiplied our total maggots by 5 just by being Mirage. And you can see that this doesn't really do that much damage. And the reason for that is because I'm currently on what I would consider like a very normal version of the Codopathicist. So this is volatile quick return explodey versions. So the idea is that you would normally just like throw and then you would detonate it. But one of the issues with Mirage is that as soon as you start like pressing Eclipse and stuff, and I throw this, you'll see that this just kills them, and then melee influence just didn't even get a chance to activate. So none of these guys, even though they're in range of melee influence, it just didn't do anything. Mirage is literally too strong for melee influence. So because of that, I have another build specifically for Mirage to kind of get around this, and that's this melee retaliation build. Melee retaliation is one of the few arcanes in the game that actually works on Mirage's clones. What we're doing is we're using Armor Strip from Pillage here to, one, stack up our shield so that melee retaliation does more, and then we have basically a full base damage build just to make the maggots here just do a ton of damage. And so what you'll see is that like as they start detonating, we're getting like 200,000, 300,000, somewhere in there, just damage from the maggots by themselves. And then of course you just use this as a light attack build too, and because it's Mirage, like each of these is doing like 4 million damage. Because I don't know. Just for reference, this is again the actual Pathicist build. This is the Mirage build. This is the same Mirage build that I showed in my Mirage video from a couple months back. Okay, this next build was not discovered by me. This is going to be weapon damage Wisp, and we're going to be talking about one of the more interesting things to come out of all of the universal weapon research that I've been doing and that a bunch of other people have been doing. Huge shout out to Stygian on the wiki, who's been doing a lot of the updates on that page. And then shout out to .Vanda, who is a YouTuber who has independently been just researching like all of the abilities in the game to check for this kind of stuff. And this is one of the ones that was missed when this augment released, and that is Wisp's 4 augment. So this thing that like puts this down on the ground, you can see this is stacking up to about what's that, 1600? And when I press nourish, you can actually see that it does increase the damage of it. And on top of that, if you're using something like Arcane Arachne, you can see that this is all the way up to like 12k damage per tick. So this is pretty good. Another interesting interesting thing about Wisp specifically is that her Breach Surge is also one of the more famous versions of weapon damage abilities. So Nourish applies to like Breach Surge. And so the idea here is that you press this, you press Breach Surge, and then as Breach Surge starts to spread, it immediately kills everything because it's Breach Surge. That's the basic idea here. Very silly. Does way more damage than it probably should. Okay, so here's the build that I've been running. This isn't necessarily the optimized version of this. While I'm running Nourish here, I do believe that if you ran Roar with Archon Vitality, that would be technically the best version of this because you would be double dipping on the heat dot, which is a very large portion of the damage for this build. If you're just doing a base damage build like this, Nourish is fine. And this also does help with energy regen. So between Archon Stretch and this, I don't really have any energy issues running this. And then kind of the rest of these mods are up to taste, depending on how much range you want and how much strength you want. Actual shards, if you wanted to do a full investment version of this with like Roar and everything, what you would be doing is you'd be pulling out these red Tau Strength shards. You'd be replacing them with radiation ability damage, and then you would have a corrosive shard here probably. In between all of those things, then this would be absolutely silly. This is sort of another mind control-ish type of build. This wasn't discovered by me. It was discovered by somebody named Andy, who is part of Mika's Discord and generally sends me spam about Excalibur. So here is the build. So Accuse is Xaku's version of Mind Control. It is an AoE, and it's a huge AoE, more specifically. So you can see that like these enemies right now are trying to shoot at me. I press this. All of the enemies with blue on the map now are enemies. And it turns out you can actually give them Nourish. And you might see this like big AoE wave that's pulsing every now and then. That is Nourish's like reflect effect. When enemies are damaged with Nourish applied to them, they'll do the same like viral AoE that Nourish normally does. But it turns out those Nourish waves can actually chain each other also. So as soon as one of them takes damage, they'll apply Nourish to everybody like within distance. Bad part about this, if I damage them, it also does that wave, and Accuse's duration is shorter than Nourish. So after a certain point, this starts killing you because like the Nourish AoE hits you and then applies viral to you, and it kills you and your team. So probably don't use this. That would be my recommendation. But I do want to show like how you would use this if you like didn't want to troll your team. Also, basic idea here. You do the same Accuse Nourish combo, and then if you press 4, this will actually pause the timer of Accuse, and you have time to kill all of your allies. As long as you kill everybody with Nourish on them, it won't kill your team. And if you notice that your 4 runs out, just repress 4 again, and you'll be fine, and you won't kill your team. So that would be my recommendation, is don't subsume over 4, and then just use it to keep the timer paused so you don't kill your team. Here's the build that I was running. I've been nourishing over 2 because I don't like the turrets, but you can nourish over 1 instead if you want to. You can nourish over 4, but like why? Just don't. And then just max range so that the nourish AoE is as large as possible. Okay, this next one is weird, and then we'll have a build that's also weird, but like also not related to any of the weird things that I show. So apologies in advance for this one being a little scuffed, but that's kind of the point of the video, isn't it? First thing that's kind of weird is that pet damage actually counts as yours for the sake of activating some untyped scripts, which is like a weird way to describe that, but you could actually see that melee influence got activated by my pet here. Another thing that actually got activated here was primary exhilarate. So my pet is doing impact procs, and those impact procs are giving me energy regen, even though I like haven't used my primary weapon here at all. So already 2 weird effects that probably shouldn't be working like this. This only happens while you're on Yareli's Marylina. So as soon as you get off, like melee influence and primary exhilarate will stop stacking from when my pet does weird status things. Your pet damage actually works for secondary fortifier too. I get on the skateboard, and you can see that when my pet starts doing damage to these guys, see how my overguard is actually going up as they do damage. So that was kind of the weird scuffed thing that I wanted to primarily show off here. But I also wanted to show off a build that was shown to me by Great Bardini, who is a Twitch streamer who mostly does Warframe content. So I'm going to be linking their stuff down in the description. And that is this tank version of Yareli that just sits on skateboard with Gloom active. So basic idea here is that there is some amount of stuff that just applies to the skateboard. One of those is armor shards. So armor shards will actually apply to Marylina, and then Gloom's lifesteal actually will heal Marylina also. And so the idea here is that because Marylina's damage reduction is actually damage redirection to Marylina, Overguard will receive the benefit of those armor shards and of the of like Gloom lifesteal and everything. So altogether, you can just see how little damage that we end up taking here. Watch my Marylina's health specifically too. Like when I start damaging them, it just immediately heals them to full. So If you're playing actively on the skateboard like this, you can semi-AFK like this. I wouldn't call it full AFK because it is dependent on Fortifier and your ability to like continually get more overguard. Here's the build. Don't play this. It's bad. Okay, this next one's going to be another weapon damage ability that I wanted to specifically highlight, and that is Flechette Orb. So Mind Layer here, it has 4 versions. One of them is this guy, which shoots out like little projectile guys like this. It's also the loudest ability in the game. And then he does have like a fake roar also with Overdriver here. So Overdriver is going to give me 75% extra damage. And then Arcane Hotshot, of all things, actually applies to Flechette Orb. So my pet is going to stack Arcane Hotshot for me real quick. You can see that I'm getting the stacks up on the buff bar there. And then when I throw this, these will actually start orange critting. And it does a lot of damage, especially when they're viral primed like this, of course. Arcane Arachne also works, so we're using that. And then we are using Nourish on this build also, just to make this even stupider. But yes, this is a very, very weird version of Vauban, at least in my opinion. And the main reason it's really weird is because our range is 34%. We've actually dumped range here so that we could have more duration and more strength. You can technically just drop narrow-minded here, and that fixes a lot of the issues with this build, but, you know, like, it's funnier this way, so we're dumping range. Beyond that, only other things really worth mentioning here is that you can technically buff this even more with, like, ability damage shards, as always. And the reason Hotshot works is because Flechette Orb actually has a base crit chance. So this would not work on any abilities that are weapon damage abilities but don't have base crit. The one exception to this is Breach Surge, which does have a base crit, but for whatever reason, they just excluded Hotshot from working on it for whatever reason. Just in case I have some extra time here too, I just want to talk about the skin too. Like, this thing is so weird. The only color channel that it has is its accents channel. So if I want this to look like even half decent, I have to just darken the accents channel, and then the rest of this just doesn't do anything. Like, you can see that like the rest of these, this is not an ephemera. This is just how it looks. Here's it without an ephemera. It didn't change. So just a very weird phased skin. I wanted to talk about a weapon that just makes me mad. Maybe a little bit of a off-topic one, but this weapon is like so unfunctional, at least its gimmick is, that I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit. So the issue with the KORUMM that I've had is that its gimmick is stupid in like 12 different ways. It doesn't scale with melee damage. It doesn't scale with elemental damage. It cannot crit. Like, even with Avenger and stuff, I've tried, you can't make this gimmick thing crit. It just doesn't work. What it does have is a forced electric proc and access to melee influence. And so even though this weapon is actually bad, it doesn't scale with half of the stats that like a normal melee weapon would. It still kills things. I don't know if that says more about the weapon or more about melee influence. Like, you can see how much damage this initial proc is doing. We're doing 967 damage, and then because of like roar or faction mods triple dipping with influence and like all this other nonsense, it still ends up killing things. And I hate it. This is the only way I was able to make the weapon actually do damage. We do have Seismic Wave on here because slam damage does actually scale its damage, and then double Nero mods, which are the only other thing that does scale it. But like roar would work, but Wrathful Advance doesn't work, Avenger doesn't work, nothing like that. And of course, like, if you want to do an actual build, here is just a regular, this is just a regular influence build. Probably what you would do for this test is just run attack speed like this. And you can see that this, it's actually functional if you just use it as a regular polearm. But I don't know, it's just goofy. Once we get Elementalist to actually activate, or Influence to actually activate, you can see that this is about what you'd expect from a melee influence polearm, right? Good, but like in a way that is melee influence. Anyways, this weapon sucks. Don't use it. Just use like a regular melee weapon instead. Okay, now that we got that one out of the way, we could actually talk about an actually good weapon. So Quassus Prime, I think people might be semi-familiar with this one. Its main gimmick is that heavy attacks like throw these projectiles, and each of these projectiles can force proc slash. They count as heavy attacks, so like they benefit from combo and everything. They're really, really strong. This thing can easily scale to level cap with a lot of different frames. And I wanted to talk about a specific variation on Varuna that I thought was funny. I don't think this is good. I think it's actually better to like not do it like this, but it is interesting. So let me try to show it off. So you might have noticed that we actually had Melee Vortex proc here, and Melee Vortex is the thing that grouped all these guys together. And now that they're grouped together, the daggers actually had punch through. So it's kind of like a self-grouping tool for this. Normally, the daggers from the Quassus don't actually proc status. They force proc slash, but they don't proc any other status. And so because of Veruna's one buff giving you a flat status chance buff that scales in a really weird way, I'm going to flash the math up for like how the status chance is calculated here. But the basic idea is that like you can actually proc status as long as it's Veruna using it. And one of those statuses you could use is magnetic. You would think that melee influence would be better in this case, right? But one thing that I didn't really talk about is that the distribution of like how the status is applied here is I think only one of the daggers is actually getting the status buff. I think the rest of them just don't get the status buff at all. I don't know why that is. It just seems to be the case. And so you only ever really get like one magnetic proc. And so it would take you like 5 throws and hitting whatever one dagger specifically procs status to proc electric for influence to actually do anything on Veruna. So I would recommend against influence. If you want this to actually be like an influence weapon, I will show the Lavos version of this too, because why not? Basic idea here is that we're using Valence Formation to force proc electric on all of the daggers. And then this is a weapon that kills enemies at level cap that also procs melee influence. Here's the deranged Veruna version. Here's the Lavos one. Here's the Veruna build. Fury helps. Okay, outro time. TS Corn, thank you for the Omniforma bundle gift. Holy shit. Thanks. I did end up using some of these for this video, so thank you. Thank you so much. Wushu, thank you for the Forma bundle. And then Savant, also thank you for the Forma bundle gift. As always, people, if you have questions or like you want to tell me something or I don't know, I respond well to Forma. I don't care if you subscribe. I don't care if you like. I do care if you send me Forma. Those are my likes and subscribes. So thank you very much.